What happens when a royal walks into the lion's den and the cameras don't stop rolling? Prince Harry, son of Diana, the rebel duke, walked into the 60-minute studio expecting control. But what unfolded was something else entirely. A pressure-cooked collision between royal defiance and the world's most unrelenting journalist. It was supposed to be a conversation. Instead, it became an implosion. You won't believe how it ended, and you won't forget how it began. The studio was quiet. Too quiet. Ignoring Simmons. A low chairs, a low table, no audience, no applause, no teleprompters. Just a room built for truth, or something close enough to pass for it. The ceiling lights were soft, cinematic, the kind that dim shadows without killing them. And across from the host chair sat Prince Harry. Not quite the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin, not quite the duke the tabloids once adored. This Harry looked calculated. His sharp suit, his stiff posture, his eyes scanning the room like a man already preparing to defend himself. Anderson Cooper entered quietly, holding a black notepad, his expression unreadable. The face of a man who'd asked hard questions to presidents, generals, and grieving parents and never flinched. "Harry," Anderson said, extending a hand, "thank you for being here." The prince gave a half smile, not warm, not cold, just enough to say, "Let's get this over with." "My pleasure," he muttered. Well, sort of. There was a beat of silence, not awkward, just tight. Compressed like a spring. And then the cameras rolled, and the first question hit like a chill through the room. "Let's start here," Anderson said calmly. "You've asked for privacy and then shared your story across books, interviews, and a Netflix series. How do you reconcile that?" Harry blinked. The smile dropped. He shifted in his chair. "Not asking for silence," he replied, his tone already defensive. "I'm asking for respect. Telling my story on my terms, that's control. That's healing." Anderson didn't blink. But healing for whom? Harry narrowed his eyes. Were the crew watching behind the cameras, it was clear. Something was brewing. This wasn't going to be a puff piece. This was going to be a slow, smoldering fire. And Harry, he was sitting right on top of it. "You've said the press betrayed you," Anderson continued, "but your book, Spare, detailed private conversations with your brother, with your father, with people who haven't had a chance to respond. Is that fair?" Harry's voice dropped. "What's fair is not letting lies define my life. They told their version, through silence. Now I'm telling mine." Anderson leaned forward slightly. "So it's retaliation?" Harris' jaw tightened. "It's truth." The word echoed, and that's when the room began to
shift. It was about something deeper, something raw. Two men, one story. No agreement on what truth looked like. And only just begun. The lights didn't change, but everything else did. Anzer's tone stayed calm, his hands resting lightly on the edge of his notebook, but his questions sharpened like scalpels. "Let's talk about family," he said, almost gently. "You've spoken of Meghan and your children with fierce protection, but when you speak publicly, when you publish a memoir, film a series, sit here in this chair, you open the door to questions. Do you see a contradiction in demanding privacy while offering only selective transparency?" Harry inhaled through his nose, slowly, controlled, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "Privacy," he said, his voice clipped, "is not about hiding. It's about choosing. I get to choose what I share. What I won't allow is people twisting the truth when I stay silent." Anderson nodded slightly, but his follow-up came fast. "But isn't that what your family's always done? Stayed silent? Are you saying their silence twisted your story too?" Harry froze. For half a second, just long enough. "I'm saying their silence was permission. he replied coldly. Permission for the tabloids to lie. Permission for the world to believe I was the problem. But I was just the one screaming while the rest stayed quiet. Menstrual felt colder. The crew had gone motionless. Camera operators didn't move. Producers stared at monitors like watching a chess match in slow motion. One wrong move, and the whole board would flip. Uncrossed his legs, shifted forward. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Do you think your mother would be proud of how you've handled this? Harry blinked. For a moment, silence. Then something changed in his face. The smirk evaporated. The composure thinned. You don't get to ask me that, he said, his voice low and razor-edged. Anderson didn't flinch. Why not? Harry leaned in, his knuckles white against the armrest. Because you didn't know her. You didn't watch her die. You didn't spend your childhood walking behind the casket that made the world cry, but made me silent. His words were laced with venom. Pain barely disguised as anger. Anderson's voice softened, just enough to sound human again. I didn't know her, he agreed. But millions felt connected to her, and many of them see you as carrying on her legacy. Is that something you embrace or reject? Harry leaned back, his arms crossed now, defensive. You all want to turn me into a symbol, he said bitterly, a shadow of her. You want me to be this perfect fusion of grief and rebellion because it fits the headline. But I'm not a candle in the wind. I'm a man, a husband, a father,
And I'm tired of being haunted by someone else's expectations. There it was. The crack. Anderson saw it too. But he didn't celebrate. He pressed on. Speaking of expectations, he continued, critics argue that Megan pulled you away from your family, that she was the catalyst for all of this. What do you say to that? Harry scoffed. You mean the vultures? Megan didn't pull me away. She saved me. From the institution. From the lies. From becoming a shell like the rest of them. Anyone who blames her is either blind or bitter. Anderson tilted his head slightly. But isn't giving someone the power to save you also giving them control over you? Harry's voice dropped to a growl. It's called partnership. Maybe if people like you weren't dissecting relationships for ratings, you'd understand that. Now it was personal. Embarrassment in the studio knew it. Anderson's pen tapped once on the notebook, then stopped. Let's shift, he said calmly. Fatherhood. You've said your children are thriving in America. How is raising them here different than it would have been in the UK? Darkened. Submission devoted. Manslaughter. My kids are kids, not props, not pawns. They don't have to perform. They don't get photographed every time they step outside. And unlike the palace, here, they have a father who would die before sacrificing them for tradition. Anderson's brow furrowed slightly. So you believe your family would have sacrificed them? Handwriting didn't blink. The monarchy doesn't protect spares, it uses them. My kids would have been collateral in a system more obsessed with perception than protection. Words were venom, and they spread quickly. But Anderson, seasoned, steel-nerved Anderson, didn't blink. He took a breath, calm, collected. But some would argue you've still put them in the spotlight. Through your projects, your interviews, your book. So how is that different? Harry leaned forward now. The smirk was back, but this time it was acidic. Because now I decide the terms. Now I decide when, where, how. That's not hypocrisy, that's freedom.
Anders paused, just long enough. Belongings. Then spoke the words that shifted the room from tense to dangerous. Or is it control, Harry? And if every question about accountability turns into an accusation, what exactly are you running from? The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. A fuse burning. And we were inches from the explosion. Harry's face hardened. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface now boiled over, spilling into every word, every breath, every glare. Running? He repeated, his tone venomous. I'm not running. I'm surviving. And if you can't tell the difference, maybe you're in the wrong profession. Anderson remained still, but his voice dropped half a tone, a shade darker, steel with a serrated edge. I've interviewed soldiers who've lost limbs, refugees who've lost families, mothers who've buried children. They spoke with dignity. What I'm seeing here isn't survival, it's entitlement. The words landed like a punch. Harry blinked. Once, twice. His lips curled into a smirk that was anything but amused. Entitlement, he echoed. From you? A man sitting on a multi-million-dollar set, grilling people under the illusion of journalism? You think you get to lecture me? Slashing didn't move, didn't react. He simply stared, letting the silence build, letting the weight of Harry's outburst fill the room like smoke. You don't want an interview, Harry continued, his voice rising. You want a spectacle. You want a tantrum. You want me to fall apart so you can say, see? Look at the angry prince. But I see through you, Anderson. You're just another vulture in a suit. And then he stood up. Fast. Abrupt. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor sliced through the studio like a knife. The camera crew flinched. A producer's hand hovered over a switch, unsure whether to cut or keep rolling. Harry pointed directly at Anderson. This was a mistake, he said through gritted teeth. You want to provoke me? You got it. But don't expect me to sit here while you twist every answer into ammunition. Anderson slowly placed his pen down on the notebook. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Calm, steady. But his voice was now surgical. I didn't twist anything. I asked questions. You didn't like them. There's a difference. Harry stepped toward the desk, just once. Close, but not touching. You think you're clever, he sneered. You think you're exposing me. But all you're doing is proving why people like me stop talking. Because no matter what we say, people like you already have your story written. Philip stood. Not rushed. Not rushed. Don't defensive. Just firm. Hal's glare head on. Then help me rewrite it, he said. Help me understand. But instead, you're pacing, shouting, slamming desks. You're not being silenced, Harry. You're self-destructing. On camera, right now. The words pierced like arrows. Direct, brutal, unforgiving. And for the first time, Harry looked shaken. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his breathing heavy, his chest rising and falling like a man drowning in his own fury. You don't know me, he snapped. Anderson once. Then tell me who you are. But don't expect the world to understand you if you're not willing to face the mirror. Harry laughed bitterly. It wasn't humor. It was the sound of a dam cracking. "I've done nothing but face mirrors," he spat. "Every day, all of my life. While the world dissected me, judged me, compared me, and now I come here, thinking maybe I'd be heard, and all you do is throw my words back at me like weapons." Shin Anderson stepped forward, slightly, measured, intentional. "I didn't make you say anything," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You chose every word, every story, every truth you shared. And if those truths hurt others, then maybe the mirror you're facing is just too honest." Relinquid. And then it happened. A flash of something, frustration, rage, humiliation, crossed Harry's face. Simmons, he stepped forward, too fast, and shoved. It wasn't violent, but it was enough. Enough to make Anderson stumble back a step. The gasp from the crew was audible. A boom mic operator dropped his rig. A camera jolted. A producer stood up in panic. Anderson caught his footing, his face pale but composed. "Did you just put your hands on me?" he asked, stunned. Misinformation. Reality crashing in like a wave. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around the room, at the stunned faces, the silent crew, the blinking red camera lights. "You pushed me," he said, his voice faltering. "You pushed me to that." Manslaughter's voice was low now, controlled, but visibly angry. "I asked you questions. You assaulted me." Hamburg stepped back, hands up, defensive. "I barely touched you." "You laid hands on someone in a professional interview," Anderson replied coldly. "That's not barely anything. That's everything." Two security personnel appeared at the edge of the set. Neither moved, but they were watching now, waiting. Harry looked between them, at the camera still recording, and for the first time, he looked like a man who realized the fire had spread beyond his control. "Don't air that," he said quickly. "Don't show that part. You can cut it." Anderson looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "This is journalism," he said. "We don't cut reality. We don't edit truth. The world is going to see exactly what happened here." Harry turned away, his hands shaking, his breath ragged. "You don't understand. You'll destroy me." Anderson shook his head. "No," he said. "You destroyed yourself. I just asked the questions." The room fell into silence. Peacefully. The kind of silence that burns. That comes after the storm, but before the consequences. For a moment, no one moved. The air inside the studio felt heavier than before, as if all the oxygen had been swallowed by tension. Cameras still rolled. The faint whir of a light rig hummed in the background. Even the control room on the other side of the glass stood frozen in stunned silence. Prince Harry stood at the edge of the set, face pale, shoulders tight, eyes flickering with panic. He looked at Anderson, then the crew, then the blinking red light on the main camera. In that one moment, that flash of fear behind the arrogance, the royal veil slipped. This wasn't just a PR disaster. This was unraveling. Anderson stood still, his face unreadable, but his voice, steady, calm, with the weight of someone who had seen far worse, broke the silence. "You laid hands on a journalist," he said slowly, "on national television. That's not just bad optics. That's a line most never come back from." Harry opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And he looked at the cameras again, desperate, pleading. "Cut it. Please, don't air this," he said. I lost control." Marshall nodded once. "You did," he agreed, "but that's not on me." A long, tense pause. Then Anderson turned to the main camera, his voice transitioning into narration, composed for the audience now,
not the guest. "Tonight, you saw a conversation fall apart in real time," he said. "A man burdened by history, unraveling under the weight of his own contradictions." He turned back to Harry, who was now standing by the exit, the mic cable dangling awkwardly from his jacket, his hands trembling. "You wanted to be heard, Harry," Anderson continued, softer now. "But part of being heard is listening. Part of being understood is being willing to explain. And part of healing is accountability." Harry looked like he wanted to speak, to fight back, to argue. But instead, he turned and walked off set. No words, no dramatic closing line, just silence, and the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway, fading. The camera slowly returned to Anderson, who remained seated. He took a breath, exhaled slowly, then looked directly into the lens. "To our viewers, we often hope interviews like this offer insight, clarity, closure. What we got tonight was something else entirely. But perhaps, in its own way, it revealed more than we expected." He paused, and then, "We'll be back after the break." Fade to black. Viewers sat stunned, some with their jaws slack, others shaking their heads, many already reaching for their phones to rewind, screenshot, and react. It was already trending. Hashtag Harry Meltdown, hashtag Anderson Unfiltered, hashtag Royal Walkout. Every social platform lit up like wildfire. Clips circulated, debates sparked. Think pieces were already being drafted before the credits had even rolled. Called it a setup. Others called it justice. And many, many more asked a single burning question. Was this the most self-destructive interview of Prince Harry's life? Or the moment he finally revealed who he really is? But whatever the answer, one thing was clear. The crown had never looked heavier, had never looked more alone. So now, the dust has settled. The chair sits empty. The lights dimmed. The microphone lies coiled like a snake on the cold studio floor. Prince Harry entered that room a man on a mission, to reclaim the narrative, to speak his truth, to silence the speculation. But he left it as a man, overwhelmed by his own contradictions. Was it pressure? Pride? A lifetime of pain wrapped in royal etiquette? Or was it something deeper? Something darker? A refusal to be questioned by anyone not wearing a crown? We may never know the full truth, but one studied, dissected, and remembered as one of the most volatile, shocking, and emotionally raw television moments in modern royal history. So now we turn it over to you. Was Prince Harry a man pushed too far? A wounded soul trying to be understood? Was this the ultimate display of unchecked entitlement from someone who has mistaken attention for accountability? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're reading every single one. And don't hold back. This isn't just a royal scandal. This is a cultural mirror. If this moment stunned you, shocked you, or just left you speechless, make sure you smash that like button. Subscribe for more gripping exposés and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next bombshell interview that breaks the internet. Because in the world of fame and power, some of the most revealing truths don't come from answers. They come from the way people react when they're asked.